If you struggle with setting up lighting in D5 Render, watch this video all the way through the end to get a proven method to always create realistic lighting in exteriors and interiors. Let's first get started with the exteriors. When setting up exteriors, there are 4 main ways that you can tackle it. The first one is with the Geo and Sky option. Over here, you can customize the time of day simply by clicking the sun icon, dragging and rotating it around. As you can see, this will also affect the angle at which the sun will come from. We can also change the north offset to have even more control on the orientation of the sun. Right to the north offset, you can also click the 3 dots to change the month and day to mimic the real life sun cycles, and also the longitude and latitude to also give the attributions of a certain location to the atmosphere. You can also control the sunlight intensity. I usually suggest to keep this pretty low, between 0.3 and 1, depending on your scene. Another very important option is the sun disk radius. This tool will allow you to control the sharpness of the shadows. Basically, the higher the sun disk radius, the softer the shadows will be, and vice versa. If you want to simplify your life and not deal with all of those technicalities, you can also turn on the custom sun setting and basically just have control over the 4 settings that you need for your sun: the intensity, the radius, and the altitude and azimuth of the sun. If you're using the Geo and Sky option for your lighting, I would still suggest you to use this option just to be a lot more efficient in your workflow. The caustic options help you with control over the reflections that the sun causes on certain materials like glassware or water. If you go downwards in the Geo and Sky menu, you will also notice the weather category where we can switch on the clouds, and now they will appear in the sky. We can control the amount of clouds that we want in the sky, the thickness, how dense we want it to be, how close we want them to be to the ground, the speed at which they move, and the direction in which they are headed. All of the other options are pretty self-explanatory and you should be able to play around with them and experiment. However, I also highly suggest to click on the option of casting shadows just to make your scene a lot more realistic. That way the clouds actually block the sunlight. The other options in the weather category do not affect the lighting so much. They are just there to set up the mood and overall image, so we will not waste time on that. The Geo and Sky option works fine if you're looking for a quick image, but if you want to add a lot more realism to your render with minimal effort, I highly advise you to use an HDRI by just clicking on the menu to the right of the environment tab. HDRIs are images taken in real life which will wrap around the environment and make real life lighting and give us a horizon line if you need it. D5 Render already has some HDRIs for us ready to use. You can just click on any of them and you'll realize that the image will automatically be applied to our scene. Now, if you want even more options and more freedom in your choice of HDRIs, I use a site called polyhaven.com, which I'm not sponsored by, and over here you can select any HDRI, download it, and by going back to D5 Render, we can add our own custom one and immediately have the effect in our render. Under the light category, you can click the icon, and now you'll be able to see that we can tweak both the skylight brightness, which is basically the light that the HDRI emits, or the background brightness, which is just the actual image that the HDRI has. Now, we can also rotate the HDRI, and if you actually have the sun option turned on and have selected to follow the HDRI for direction, you will notice that together with the HDRI rotation, the sun angle will change as well. What D5 Render does here is basically detect the brightest point of the HDRI and acknowledge that as the sun, and the angle of the light will come from there. In the temperature menu, we can do the color correction of the HDRI. Now, this is super useful if you're more advanced, but if you are just starting out, don't even mess with it because it is not worth it. Just skip that for now. At the sun option, we can tweak all of the settings, just like in the Geo and Sky tab: the intensity, the sun disk radius, as well as the color temperature. You will notice that if you have like a sunset or a sunrise setting, you will need to have the sun color temperature more on the warm side, and if it is a sunny daytime, usually it will be more towards the blue tint. In the direction section, we just talked about what the follow HDRI option does. However, the custom one basically makes the sun act independent to the HDRI. However, I do not recommend this since it will look very realistic in exteriors. For interiors, we'll go through this a bit later on. And this is pretty much it with HDRIs. However, one last thing that I would add about HDRI is that experiment with as many as possible and then choose 3 to 5 that you will use in most cases, since that will automate a lot of your workflow and cut down on the time you spend with trial and error on each render. One of my favorite features that D5 Render offers is the AI atmospheric match. What this feature allows us to do is to get any reference image online of a certain type of lighting mood and upload it to D5. The software will automatically detect all the attributes of that image and apply all of the effects on our scene. It basically works like a copy and paste of lighting settings. It is so insanely useful, and it basically helps you set up everything in just one click. I highly recommend you to use this feature because it just works wonders. If you cannot seem to find a reference that matches your scene, you can also go inside this icon with a little gradient, click on D5 Curated, and you'll find a bunch of presets of scenes, and you can just click on any of them just like the AI atmospheric match, and it will be applied with just one click. And now let's take a look at how we can set up the lighting in interiors. The geo and sky options are almost useless in interiors if you want to maximize the realism. That's why you go straight to Azure Eyes. I see it all the time when people mistake Azure Eyes as something that is only used in the exteriors. However, the truth is that Azure Eyes are so powerful that all the materials in the interior will reflect the colors that the Azure Eye emits. I used 5 different Azure Eyes, and here's the effects that it had on my scene. So once again, I highly recommend to test out a bunch of Azure Eyes to know which one you're choosing and just to make sure that you're choosing the right one. However, after you have gone through the whole process, here's what I recommend. First, go to the Effects tab and turn off Auto Exposure. Now, go back to the Azure Eye and click on the menu next to the light. Here, I want you to set the skylight between 0.2 to 0.4, depending on what Azure Eyes you're using, and to keep the background at a level which doesn't take too much attention. Then, go to the sun intensity, make the direction as custom, because in interiors, the actual Azure Eye image is a lot less visible. So even if the sun is not coming from the brightest point of the background, it will not be visible. Next up, you want to make the sun intensity to something low between 0.03 and 0.05 and change the sun angle in a way that is coming a bit more parallel to our windows. Once you set this up, I highly recommend to, instead of playing around with the brightness that the light of the Azure Eye emits, just tweak the exposure setting in the Effects tab and you will see much better the actual effect of the lighting. Also, something else that I highly recommend is to add a white plane underneath your model because it seems to help with the light bounces on the scene. Here's a comparison on how the scene looks like with and without the white plane underneath. This is the simplest form of natural lighting that we can set in our interiors that will immediately have the highest effect in our scene. However, let's now take a look at how we can use artificial lighting objects. If you click the light bulb option in D5 Render, you'll notice 4 different options showing up: the point light, the spotlight, the strip light, and the rectangular light. You can basically activate them in just one click, but the difference is in the way that they behave. Let's go through them one by one. The point light acts like a sphere that distributes the light equally in all directions. Once you place it on the right, you will see a few different options to customize. The intensity determines how much light it emits. The attenuation radius limits the area on which the light affects, and the light source radius is pretty self-explanatory. It just increases or decreases the radius of the light source, and you can see it affects more clearly if you just click Show the Light Shape. Another very important option that D5 Render offers to customize your lights is to not show them in reflection. This helps to hide areas where you cheated with your lighting. I will show you in an instance where this is a lot more applicable in the rectangular lighting. And then finally, you can change the temperature of the light that the object itself emits, or you can add a custom color to it if you need something more specific for your project. Next up is the spotlight. This lighting object behaves in a way that it directs lighting at a certain point, and it is useful when wanting to emphasize something. Once you place the spotlight, you will notice that most of the options are the same as any other lighting object, except for one new category which you can find written as IES. IES is a file that you can import in your light object to change the way that the light is distributed. If you click on the drop-down menu, you can see that D5 Render already has some options that you can choose from, which are already built in. However, you can also add your own custom one if you need to. I personally download these IES profiles from ieslibrary.com, and I can import them with just one click in the plus icon in the Customize IES option. Next up is a strip light option, which is useful for decorative elements or strip LED lighting. The options next to it are similar to all of the other lighting objects, and you can change the intensity, the distribution angle, the area which it affects, the color temperature, etc. Now the final option is rectangular lighting, which distributes the light in a rectangular shape. Just like all of the other light objects, it has all the same options. However, there is one more special use case for this one. What you can also do is to set up these rectangular lights exactly where the openings of the windows are and tweak the size to be the same in order to contribute to the overall lighting of the area. However, make sure that the intensity is not so high that it takes attention from the light that the Azure Eye is emitting. Now that you learned all the in and outs of lighting, you definitely want to set up realistic materials, which you can learn by watching the video right here.